So one thing that I feel like Silent Hill does better than Resident Evil are the puzzles. The puzzles are much more difficult in my opinion, so much so that some of which could come off as damn near impossible. So in today's episode of Nerd Space, I want to dive down into the Silent Hill franchise once again as I locate the most difficult brain teasers of the series. For the record, we're looking at each puzzle on the hardest difficulty to make things more interesting. Before that though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel if you like the content that I bring you guys. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But with that out of the way, this is Nerd Space Games with my top 10 hardest puzzles in Silent Hill. Let's get it. Number 10, The Locked Door, Silent Hill, The Short Message. The Short Message is essentially inspired by PT, a playable trailer created to tease a canceled project called Silent Hills. While the game features little to no gameplay and primarily focuses on running and avoiding an origami monster known as Sakura Head, there is one point of the game that presents a somewhat difficult puzzle to solve. Near the end of the game, you'll find yourself in front of a locked door with 5 chains attached to it. In order to unlock each chain, you must locate a photo somewhere hidden in what seems like an endless maze. Because most of the hallways and rooms look very similar in the other world, it's extremely hard to recognize where you have been and where you are going. Add that to the fact that you have Sakura Head chasing you, and if she manages to catch you, then you have to start all over from square one. This puzzle is unique in the fact that it doesn't necessarily require you to think too hard, but rather keep calm and have patience as you find each of the 5 photos. Number 9, Gumball Machine, Silent Hill, Shattered Memories. Shattered Memories is different from most games of the series as it features very limited gameplay and focuses more on the story. However, it does feature a lot of puzzles. While most of the puzzles are fairly easy to solve throughout the game, there is one puzzle that becomes more of a headache than any other puzzle in the game. That of course is the Gumball Machine. While running through the nightmare world of the Toluca Mall, Harry will come across a dead end with a Gumball Machine. At that moment, he'll receive a call that talks about the mall's mascot, Tuki the Toucan, and how the colors on the beak are basically the ones that you need to choose in the Gumball Machine. The only problem is that you don't actually know what the colors are, and it's not like you have a picture of Tuki, right? Well, as Harry was running through the mall, there was a statue of Tuki in the middle of the mall. In order to proceed, you'll need to run back through the maze that's already hard to navigate, locate the statue that is illustrated by the X on your map, jot down the colors on Tuki's beak, and then race back to the end of the maze and input those colors into the Gumball Machine to proceed. It's not necessarily the most difficult puzzle to solve considering that it marks your map as to where the sculpture is located, but it can prove to be tedious and annoying to navigate the maze while having all of the enemies chase you down. Number 8, Church Puzzle, Silent Hill Homecoming. Silent Hill Homecoming gets a lot of heat, and for good reason. It's one of my least favorites of the franchise, mainly due to its gameplay and an uninteresting main character. However, there are some shining moments in this game. Take the church puzzle for example. At one point, Alex finds himself searching a church for 5 plates. After receiving all the plates, he must put them in a specific order to continue forward. The difficult part about this puzzle is trying to decipher what each plate symbolizes. Basically, you must match each plate with one of the following: penitence, desire, vengeance, sorrow, and sacrifice. The clues to which plate is associated with each word is located in either how you retrieve the plate or the plate itself. Sometimes you might even find yourself having to backtrack to fully understand the symbol behind the plate. But what keeps this puzzle from moving any higher up on this list is the fact that at least 2 to 3 plates are easy to decipher, and the remaining 2 to 3 plates could be solved with a process of elimination if you don't feel like thinking too much on it. Number 7, The Rotating Cube, Silent Hill 2. Some of the most frustrating puzzles in video games are the ones that are basically a guessing game. Take the rotating cube in Silent Hill 2 for example. At one point in the game, James will come across a labyrinth where he'll eventually find a creepy-ass cube in the center of the room. Upon inspecting the cube, you learn that it can be rotated into different positions. Immediately, you may not realize what this is doing until you enter the preceding room, where you'll learn that the room shifts as the cube shifts. The point of the puzzle is to open doorways that will allow you to continue on. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done. While one could try to match the position of the walls with the cube before trying to solve it, that could prove harder than it sounds since you'll need to enter and exit the rooms to keep getting an idea of how the room is currently shaped. So for those of us not as good at matching the walls with the cube, like myself, we find it easier to use the process of elimination instead. By trying every angle for each face on the cube, eventually you'll find the correct position that'll allow you to continue on. It may not be the smoothest transition, but for someone like me, it was a lot easier than trying to solve it logically. Number 6, Zodiac Puzzle, Silent Hill. The original Silent Hill game challenged the players to think a lot about each puzzle since most of them were riddle based. So by the time the player nears the end of the game and comes across the Zodiac Puzzle, your expectations are through the roof with the knowledge of how out there some of these riddles can get. However, Team Silent were extremely clever with the Zodiac Puzzle as they went a different route. They went with a more simple solution than the players expected. See, up until now, we were trained to think far outside of the box and to examine our surroundings for additional information that'll help us with solving a riddle. So when we came across images that mirrored the zodiac symbols and we saw numbers attached to each image, our immediate thought was that it was going to play with the zodiac symbols and dates associated with them. However, the true solution was much more simple than that. This puzzle required a different approach that required you to look past the red herring we saw before us and recognize what was right in front of us. Instead of looking at how the zodiacs connected to each month, the numbers were actually counting the amount of limbs on each image. Therefore, all you had to do to solve this puzzle was count how many limbs were in the images without numbers and put those numbers in its place. It was such a simple solution to a simple puzzle, but because of the expectations that Silent Hill had set for us up until this point, we became our own worst enemy and made this puzzle much more difficult than it actually was. Number 5, Piano Puzzle, Silent Hill. Sticking with the original Silent Hill, we take a look at yet another puzzle that really stumped us in this game. Actually, you could argue that the piano puzzle kind of set the tone for what to expect in the Silent Hill puzzles, and it's part of the reason why the Zodiac puzzle later made fools of us. As the first difficult puzzle in the game, Harry eventually comes across the music room. Here in this room, you'll find a piano with bloody keys and a poem written in blood on the blackboard. As you would have expected, the poem provides a clue on how to solve the piano puzzle, which basically requires the player to play specific keys in a specific order. The first thing you'll need to realize in order to solve this puzzle is that there are 5 muted keys and there are 5 birds mentioned in the poem. So logically, you can figure out that each bird gives you a clue to each of the 5 keys. From here, it's about trying to understand how each bird is connected to each key. For example, a raven is black, which immediately points to one of the black keys. And from there, you'll need to find out which black key it's associated with from the rest of the riddle. Once you figure out what the poem is trying to tell you and the fact that you're supposed to use the 5 muted keys and not the keys that play music, discovering the solution is fairly straightforward. Still, it can prove quite a challenge at first and take some time before you realize the trick and what the poem is actually trying to tell you. Number 4, Crematorium, Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 3 features plenty of challenging puzzles, most of which are riddles that tie into other riddles in a single puzzle. Especially if you take a look at the Brookhaven Hospital, more specifically in the Crematorium. Here lies one of the hardest puzzles of the franchise. In this room, you'll find a furnace with a 4-digit lock on it, stretchers with numbers and song lyrics on each of them, and an oven that has a poem on it. The goal is to unlock the furnace, and to get that code, you'll need to examine the poem on the oven. After reading the poem, you'll receive hints that connect to different songs laid out on the stretchers throughout the room. Trying to find the connection to each song is extremely difficult, and some of which are very minor connections, but that's not even the most difficult part. The third verse of the puzzle is the interesting one, as no matter how you look at it, it doesn't connect to any of the songs. That is until you connect the dots with other files and a phone call you heard earlier in the game regarding Stanley Coleman. That's right, not only does this puzzle connect 2 separate riddles, but also connects it to information that you found outside of this room without any hints pointing you towards that direction. Like, what the fuck? Number 3, Coin Box, Silent Hill 2. In Silent Hill 2, we come across one of the more iconic puzzles in the game, the Coin Box. While searching the apartment buildings, James will eventually come across a locked box with 5 coin-shaped openings on it. Along with that is a riddle to help you understand the order of the coins. Now the easy normal version of the puzzle are pretty straightforward, but per the rules of this list, we're focusing on the hardest difficulty, and that one really challenges you to think outside of the box. Pun intended. First off, your immediate thought when you first find this box is that you'll need 5 coins to complete the puzzle. Considering that the hard difficulty and the extra difficulty doesn't clearly state that you only need 3 coins, not 5 to solve it, you'll find yourself not even attempting the puzzle until you search the apartment buildings multiple times for no reason. When you do eventually realize that you only need 3 coins to solve the puzzle, the poem laid out before you is extremely difficult to decipher, especially on the extra riddle difficulty, which actually requires you to examine the back of each coin to get more details needed to solve the riddle. Number 2, Brookhaven Keypad, Silent Hill 3. After making this list, I realized 2 things. 1, the Brookhaven Hospital in Silent Hill 3 loves testing your puzzle skills. And 2, Stanley is a dick. Him and the Brookhaven Hospital from Silent Hill 3 are connected to not 1 but 2 of the hardest puzzles in the franchise. For the second entry on this list, we take a look at yet another puzzle in the Brookhaven Hospital, which, surprise surprise, is connected to a diary entry from Stanley Coleman. This time we're looking at one of the Brookhaven Keypad doors. More specifically, the one on the second floor that leads to the patient wing. On the easier difficulties, this puzzle is fairly straightforward to understand, but on the hard riddle difficulty, you must be extremely creative with solving this one. Firstly, you'll find a diary entry from Stanley that'll point to the memo on the blackboard as the key to figuring out the code for the second floor patient wing. The memo on the blackboard is extremely disturbing to read, but it's also vital to solving this riddle. Throughout the memo, the doctor describes different parts of his lover's face and how he wants to taste her all over. Yet, there are no numbers to be found on this memo. The way to connect this memo to the keypad is to imagine the keypad as the face of the doctor's victim. For example, the left eye would be number 1, right eye would be number 3, the nose would be in the middle, so that would be number 5, and the mouth would be under that, which would be number 8. You with me so far? I know, a little confusing, but stick with me for a little bit longer. Only after picturing the victim's face from the memo as the keypad can you start to decipher the code from the memo. For example, the first time the memo describes the doctor tasting her blood is after he pierces her left eye socket with his finger and he licks up a bloody tear from her. Well, since it mentions drinking the tear, that means it would be under the left eye, and the left ear is under the left eye in terms of the face. Therefore, if the left eye is 1, then the left ear is 4, making the first digit number 4. Does any of this make sense? And if you're wondering how you're supposed to make these connections, well, that's a big reason as to why it ranks as number 2 on this list. Because outside of Stanley's diary telling you that the memo is the key to unlocking the keypad door, nothing in this game will tell you that you will need to picture a human fucking face to create a password from this disturbing memo. Number 1, the Bookstore, Silent Hill 3. By now, you've probably realized something. Silent Hill 3 is without a doubt the most difficult game of the franchise when it comes to the puzzles. Funny enough though, the hardest puzzle in the game is actually the first puzzle of the game, as you'll come across it while exploring the first main location of Silent Hill 3, the mall. While exploring the mall, Heather will eventually find herself in a bookstore, with the only exit being a locked door with a keypad. Luckily, it's pretty obvious how you'll need to get this code, as there are 5 Shakespeare books that require you to arrange them in order based on a riddle. The hard part comes from the riddle itself. First, you'll need to have some basic outside knowledge of Shakespeare tragedies, meaning that if you don't at least understand the stories of Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and so on, then you're probably screwed from the get-go. This is completely unheard of, considering that most puzzles and video games don't require you to have outside knowledge unless they give you a way to find that information out in the game somewhere. Unfortunately, you have no such luck with Silent Hill 3. But even if you manage to decipher which book connects to which verse of the riddle, there's still more to solve. After arranging the books in order, you'll notice that there's still a verse that you haven't done anything with. Plus, you'll realize that you actually have 5 digits instead of the 4 digits needed to open the door. Well, now it's time to do some math. The unused verse of the riddle implies that you have to grab specific books, again, by using Shakespeare knowledge obtained outside of the game itself, and then multiply the number associated with them. Plus, it also gives you a hint to remove one of the 5 books, giving you a 4-digit code. Yeah, it's kind of a lot, and most of it deals with knowledge of Shakespeare. Without that knowledge, well, you're shit out of luck on solving this one. Well, that's it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my number one pick. Is the Bookstore puzzle in Silent Hill 3 the hardest of the franchise, or do you think a different puzzle deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel if you like the content that I bring you guys. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.